What if everything you thought you knew about science and God was incomplete? What if the greatest minds who unlocked the secrets of the universe were also searching for something beyond the equations? Today, we're diving into the most profound question humanity has ever asked. Stay with me, because by the end of this journey, you might see the cosmos in a completely different light. Welcome to Logic Over Spirit. I'm your guide on a journey that billions have taken, yet few have explored with both scientific rigor and spiritual honesty. Picture this. A scientist stands beneath a star-filled sky. On one hand, they hold the mathematical laws that govern galaxies. In the other, an ancient question that no equation can answer. Can the universe that follows precise laws exist without a lawgiver? Can the cosmos that science reveals to us also reveal a creator? This isn't a story about choosing sides. It's not about faith versus facts or religion versus reason. This is about something far more interesting. It's about the real intellectual journey of those who have stared deepest into the fabric of reality and asked, what does this all mean? Over the next hour, we'll explore this question through three powerful lenses. Science, which shows us how the universe works. Religion, which asks why it exists at all. And philosophy, which helps us navigate the space between them. We'll examine evidence that makes even skeptics pause. We'll confront arguments that challenge believers. And we'll follow the footsteps of brilliant minds who refuse to accept easy answers from either side. So whether you're a devout believer, a committed atheist, or someone standing somewhere in between, I invite you to approach this with an open mind. Because the universe, in all its staggering complexity and mysterious beauty, deserves nothing less than our honest investigation. Let's begin. Chapter 1, The Universe Speaks. Here's something that will make you stop and think. Every single atom in your body was forged in the heart of a dying star billions of years ago. The iron in your blood, the calcium in your bones, the oxygen you're breathing right now, all of it, stardust. Carl Sagan said it perfectly. The cosmos is within us. We are made of star stuff. We are a way for the universe to know itself. But here's where it gets interesting. The universe doesn't just exist. It follows rules, precise, mathematical, elegant rules. Drop a ball anywhere in the universe, and gravity pulls it down with the same force. Light always travels at the same speed. Energy can neither be created nor destroyed. These aren't suggestions, they're laws. And they work the same way, whether you're on Earth, on Mars, or in a galaxy 13 billion light-years away. Think about that for a moment. Why should the universe obey laws at all? Why shouldn't it be pure chaos? Why shouldn't gravity work differently on Tuesdays? Why shouldn't atoms behave randomly with no predictable patterns? But they don't. Instead, we find that nature operates according to principles so reliable that we can send spacecraft to distant planets, predict eclipses centuries in advance, and design technology based on quantum mechanics that works every single time. Let me share something that keeps physicists up at night: the fundamental constants of nature. Things like the gravitational constant, the speed of light, the charge of an electron. These numbers had to be exactly what they are for the universe to exist as we know it, and I mean exactly. If gravity were slightly stronger, stars would burn out too quickly for life to evolve. If it were slightly weaker, stars would never form at all. If the strong nuclear force that holds atoms together was just 2% different, either direction, carbon wouldn't exist. No carbon means no organic chemistry. No organic chemistry means no life. The cosmological constant, which determines the expansion rate of the universe, is fine-tuned to 1 part in 10 to the power of 120. To put that in perspective, that's like throwing a dart at a target the size of the entire known universe and hitting a bullseye the size of a single atom. Not once, but with dozens of these constants, all perfectly calibrated. Let's look at another example. The ratio between the electromagnetic force and gravity. This ratio is about 10 to the power of 36. That's a 1 followed by 36 zeros. If this ratio were even slightly different, stars couldn't form the right elements for life. Too strong, and stars would be too small and cold. Too weak, and they'd be too large and burn out too fast. Or consider water. This simple molecule, H2O, has properties that seem almost designed for life. Unlike almost every other substance, water expands when it freezes. That's why ice floats, and that's why lakes freeze from the top down, allowing life to survive beneath the ice. If water behaved like other substances, ice would sink, lakes would freeze solid from the bottom up, and aquatic life as we know it couldn't exist. Water also has an unusually high heat capacity, meaning it can absorb lots of energy without rapidly changing temperature. This stabilizes Earth's climate and regulates body temperature in living organisms. It's an extraordinary solvent, allowing the complex chemistry of life to occur. Are these coincidences? Or patterns? Physicist Paul Davies writes, "There is for me powerful evidence that there is something going on behind it all. It seems as though somebody has fine-tuned nature's numbers to make the universe. The impression of design is overwhelming. But it goes deeper than just constants." Let's talk about the beginning. The Big Bang. About 13.8 billion years ago, everything that exists, all matter, all energy, all space, all time, erupted from a singularity smaller than an atom. In the first fraction of a second, the universe expanded faster than light. This is called cosmic inflation. And here's the remarkable thing. The rate of this inflation had to be astonishingly precise. Too fast, and matter would have spread too thin for galaxies to form. Too slow, and the universe would have collapsed back on itself immediately. The margin of error. About 1 part in 10 to the power of 60. That's a decimal point, followed by 59 zeros, and then a 1. We're talking about precision that makes Swiss watchmakers look careless. And it gets better. Or stranger, depending on your perspective. The early universe had to have almost perfect uniformity. If matter had been distributed unevenly by more than 1 part in 100,000, we'd either have nothing but black holes or nothing but empty space. No stars, no planets, no you. Yet here we are, living on a rocky planet orbiting a stable star in a galaxy that formed at just the right time in cosmic history. Made of elements forged in earlier generations of stars that had to live and die in very specific ways. Nobel laureate Arno Penzias, who discovered the cosmic microwave background radiation, said, "Astronomy leads us to a unique event, a universe which was created out of nothing. One with the very delicate balance needed to provide exactly the conditions required to permit life, and one which has an underlying, one might say, supernatural plan." Now, before we go further, let me be clear. I'm not saying this proves anything. Not yet. I'm simply asking you to sit with this fact. The universe is not chaos, it's an order. Profound, mathematical, breathtaking order. The equations that describe reality are not just accurate, they're beautiful. Physicists often talk about the elegance of natural laws. Einstein's field equations for general relativity. Maxwell's equations for electromagnetism. The Schrödinger equation in quantum mechanics. These aren't just formulas, they're poetry written in the language of mathematics. And here's something that should strike you as deeply weird. Mathematics, a tool we invented in our minds, turns out to be the language the universe speaks. We create abstract mathematical structures, and then we discover they perfectly describe physical reality. Eugene Wigner, another Nobel Prize winner, called this the unreasonable effectiveness of mathematics in the natural sciences. He wrote, "The miracle of the appropriateness of the language of mathematics for the formulation of the laws of physics is a wonderful gift, which we neither understand nor deserve. Why should the universe be mathematical at all? Why should our minds evolve to find food and avoid predators on the African savanna? Be capable of understanding quantum field theory and general relativity? This is what scientists call the comprehensibility of the universe. Not only does it follow laws, but those laws are discoverable by creatures like us. We can understand them. We can predict with them. We can test them. That's not a given. It's not obvious. It's actually quite strange when you think about it. And order always makes us ask the next question. Where did this order come from? Why is there law instead of lawlessness? Why is there structure instead of chaos? Why is there something rather than nothing? These questions don't have easy answers. But they're the right questions to ask. And they're the questions that will guide us through the rest of this journey. Chapter 2, The Materialist Answer. Let's be fair. Let's hear the other side, because it's powerful and it deserves our respect. Many scientists look at the same evidence and reach a completely different conclusion. They say the universe needs no designer because the laws of physics themselves are sufficient explanation. The universe, they argue, is simply what happens when you have quantum fields, space-time, and the laws of thermodynamics. Stephen Hawking famously wrote, because there is a law such as gravity. The universe can and will create itself from nothing. Spontaneous creation is the reason there is something rather than nothing, why the universe exists, why we exist. This is the materialist position. Everything, including consciousness, meaning, and morality, emerges from physical processes. No divine hand needed, just matter, energy, and time. Let's understand this perspective deeply, because it's not a position born from ignorance or laziness. It's a rigorous philosophical stance, backed by centuries of scientific success. The materialist argument goes like this: every time we've investigated a natural phenomenon, we've found a natural explanation. When ancient people saw lightning, they thought it was Zeus throwing thunderbolts. We discovered its electrical discharge. When people saw diseases, they thought it was divine punishment. We discovered bacteria and viruses. When people saw the incredible diversity of life, they thought it required a divine craftsman. We discovered evolution by natural selection. Over and over, supernatural explanations have been replaced by natural ones. Never, in the history of scientific investigation, has it gone the other way. We've never discovered that what we thought was natural actually required divine intervention. This pattern suggests a conclusion. As science advances, the territory for God shrinks. What we once attributed to the supernatural, we now understand through physics, chemistry, and biology. Why, the materialist asks, should we expect it to be any different with the origin of the universe or the fine-tuning of constants? Carl Sagan articulated this view powerfully. The cosmos is all that is, or ever was, or ever will be. Our faintest contemplations of the cosmos stir us. There is a tingling in the spine, a catch in the voice, a faint sensation, as if a distant memory, of falling from a height. We know we are approaching the greatest of mysteries. Notice what he's saying. The cosmos itself, without any supernatural addition, is enough to inspire awe and wonder. We don't need to invoke anything beyond nature to feel that profound sense of meaning. And the fine-tuning problem, they have an answer for that too. The multiverse hypothesis. The idea that our universe is just one of countless universes, each with different physical constants. We happen to live in the one that's suitable for life, not because it was designed for us, but because if it wasn't, we wouldn't be here to observe it. It's called the anthropic principle. Think of it like a cosmic lottery. If you have infinite tickets, eventually, one of them wins. Our universe is the winning ticket. Now, you might say, but we have no evidence for other universes. And you'd be right. But materialists would counter. We have no evidence for God either. The multiverse is at least consistent with known physics. Some interpretations of quantum mechanics and string theory actually predict multiple universes. It's not just made up to solve a problem. It emerges from mathematics. Leonard Susskind, one of the founders of string theory, explains, the multiverse is not some kind of metaphysical idea that physicists have dreamed up. It's a consequence that comes naturally out of physical theories that were designed for other purposes. And here's the thing about the anthropic principle. It's actually quite elegant. We shouldn't be surprised that the universe appears fine-tuned for life, because if it weren't, we wouldn't be here to notice. It's like a puddle marveling at how perfectly the hole in the ground fits its shape. The puddle formed to fit the hole, not the other way around. Richard Dawkins puts it bluntly. The universe we observe has precisely the properties we should expect if there is, at bottom, no design, no purpose, no evil and no good, nothing but blind, pitiless indifference. Strong words, but let's understand what he's really saying. He's not being cruel or nihilistic. He's making an observation about nature. Nature doesn't care about us. Earthquakes kill thousands without discrimination. Diseases affect the innocent and guilty alike. The universe operates according to physical laws that have no moral content, and when we look at Earth's history, we see massive extinctions. We see species that evolved for millions of years and then vanished. We see suffering and death as integral parts of the natural process. If the universe were designed by a benevolent creator specifically for us, why all the waste? Why billions of years of cosmic history before humans appeared? Why the vast emptiness of space? The materialist sees this and concludes, the universe looks exactly like we'd expect if it weren't designed for any purpose. It simply is. This view is intellectually consistent. It doesn't require supernatural explanations. It stays within the bounds of what we can measure and test, and for many brilliant scientists, it's enough. Consider the words of Steven Weinberg, a Nobel Prize winner in physics. The more the universe seems comprehensible, the more it also seems pointless. He's saying that as we understand more about how nature works, we find no evidence of purpose embedded in it. The laws of physics describe mechanisms, not meanings, but materialists aren't cold or unfeeling. Many find profound beauty and meaning in a universe without design. They see evolution as an epic story of life, finding ways to persist and flourish. They see the laws of physics as an elegant structure that needs no external justification. They find meaning in human connection, in the pursuit of knowledge, in reducing suffering and increasing well-being. As Bertrand Russell wrote, the universe may be purposeless, but that doesn't mean our lives have to be. We can create our own meaning, our own values, our own reasons for living. In fact, some materialists argue their worldview is more honest and more responsible. If this life is all we have, then it becomes infinitely precious. We can't defer justice to an afterlife. We can't explain suffering as part of a divine plan. We have to face reality as it is, and work to make it better. But here's the thing, and this is where our journey gets really interesting. Science is extraordinary at answering questions. How does gravity work? How do stars form? How did life evolve? How does consciousness arise from neural activity? But there's a question science, by its very nature, cannot answer. Why? Why is there something rather than nothing? Why do these laws exist instead of different laws, or no laws at all? Why does the universe bother to exist? Why is it comprehensible? Why does matter organize itself into patterns that eventually become conscious and ask these very questions? The physicist, Sean Carroll, an atheist, admits this honestly. He says, science doesn't answer the why questions. It answers the questions. And that's okay, but is it okay? Can we really live in a universe of such staggering complexity and beauty and never ask what it means? Here's where the materialist position faces its deepest challenge, not from religion, but from the simple fact of existence itself. The universe didn't have to exist. The laws of physics didn't have to be what they are. Consciousness didn't have to emerge. Yet here we are, asking questions about our own existence. Even if we accept the multiverse hypothesis, we haven't escaped the question. We've just pushed it back one level. Why is there a multiverse? Why does it follow certain rules that allow some universes within it to support life? Why is there a quantum vacuum that can fluctuate and produce universes? At some point, you hit the wall. Either something exists necessarily, without explanation, or you have an infinite regress of causes, which most philosophers consider logically impossible. The materialist says that something is the quantum vacuum, or the multiverse, or just the brute fact of existence. The theist says it's God. But both are making a metaphysical claim that goes beyond pure science, and that's the key insight. Both positions require a leap of faith. The materialist has faith that no explanation beyond the physical will ever be needed. The theist has faith that consciousness and intention are more fundamental than matter and energy. Neither can be proven with complete certainty. Both are interpretations of the evidence we see. This is where science reaches its boundary, and philosophy must step in. Chapter 3: The Philosopher's Struggle. Philosophy has wrestled with these questions for thousands of years. Long before we had telescopes and particle accelerators, thinkers were asking, what is the first cause? Here's the classic argument. Everything that exists has a cause. You exist because your parents existed. They existed because of their parents. The Earth exists because of the solar nebula. The solar nebula existed because of earlier stellar generations. You can trace this chain back and back and back, but you can't go back infinitely. Infinite regress is logically impossible. At some point, there must be an uncaused cause. A prime mover, something that exists necessarily, not contingently. Aristotle called it the unmoved mover. Thomas Aquinas called it God. Let's break this down more carefully, because it's one of the most important arguments in the history of human thought. It's called the cosmological argument, and it comes in several forms. The version Aquinas offered goes like this. In the world, we see things that are caused, but nothing can cause itself, because that would mean it existed before it existed, which is a contradiction. So everything that's caused must be caused by something else. But this chain of causes can't go back forever. Therefore, there must be a first cause that itself is uncaused. And this first cause, we call God. Now, here's where it gets philosophically interesting. What are the properties this first cause must have? Well, it must be eternal, because if it had a beginning, it would need a cause. It must be unchanging, because change implies moving from potentiality to actuality, which requires a cause. It must exist necessarily, not contingently. It must be immaterial, because matter is composite and contingent, and it must be powerful enough to bring everything else into existence. These properties, Aquinas argued, are what we mean when we talk about God. Not necessarily a personal God who answers prayers, but at minimum, an eternal, necessary, immaterial, powerful, first cause. But here's where it gets tricky. Even if you accept this argument, it doesn't tell you anything specific about what that first cause is. It could be an impersonal force. It could be the quantum vacuum. It could be a multiverse generator. Or yes, it could be a conscious, purposeful creator. The atheist philosopher Bertrand Russell challenged this directly. He famously said in a debate, if everything must have a cause, then God must have a cause. If God can exist without a cause, then why can't the universe exist without a cause? It's a fair point, and it reveals something important about the cosmological argument. It's not claiming that everything needs a cause, it's claiming that everything that begins to exist needs a cause. If something is eternal, if it never began, then it doesn't need a cause. So the question becomes, is the universe eternal, or did it have a beginning? For most of history, this was purely philosophical speculation. But in the 20th century, science gave us an answer. The Big Bang Theory tells us the universe did have a beginning, about 13.8 billion years ago. Does that prove the cosmological argument? Not quite, because you can still argue that something physical, like a quantum vacuum or a prior state of existence, could be the eternal necessary thing rather than God. But it does shift the burden of proof. If the universe isn't eternal, then something caused it. And that something can't be physical in the normal sense, because physical laws in space-time itself came into existence with the Big Bang. This leads us to another philosophical approach, the argument from contingency. This is more subtle than the cosmological argument, and in some ways more powerful. Here's how it works. Look around at everything that exists. Trees, mountains, stars, galaxies. None of these things exist necessarily. They're all contingent. They could have not existed. In fact, at one point in the past, they didn't exist. But if everything in the universe is contingent, then the universe as a whole is contingent. And contingent things require an explanation outside themselves. They need a reason why they exist rather than not exist. The philosopher Gottfried Leibniz put it this way: why is there something rather than nothing? This is perhaps the most fundamental question of all. And the answer, according to Leibniz, must be found in something that exists necessarily. Something that cannot not exist. Something that is the reason for its own existence. And this necessary being, by definition, cannot be part of the physical universe, because everything physical is contingent. It could have been different, or not existed at all. Now, here comes the skeptical pushback. The philosopher David Hume argued that even if every individual thing in the universe requires an explanation, the universe as a whole doesn't necessarily require one. Maybe the collection of contingent things just exists, and there's no further explanation needed. It's like asking, why do all these bricks exist? Well, because someone made them. But then asking, why does the pile of bricks exist? The answer is just, because the individual bricks exist. The pile doesn't need an additional explanation beyond the bricks themselves. But is the universe really like a pile of bricks, or is it more like a building, where the structure and organization require an explanation beyond just the materials? This is where different philosophers disagree. And honestly, pure logic can't resolve it. We're at the edge of what reason alone can tell us. But there's another philosophical approach. Not proof, but inference. Not certainty, but probability. The philosopher Richard Swinburne argues that the existence of God is the best explanation for several key features of reality. Why is there something rather than nothing? Why is the universe orderly and comprehensible? Why do we have consciousness? Why do we have moral intuitions? Why is there beauty? You can explain each of these without God, but Swinburne argues that God provides a more elegant, unified explanation. It's like a detective looking at evidence. You don't have absolute proof, but you can make an inference to the best explanation. Imagine you walk into a room and see a dartboard with a dart in the exact center. Possible explanations include random chance or someone with skill aimed for the center. Technically, random chance could account for it, but the better explanation, the more probable explanation, is intentional. Swinburne applies the same reasoning to the universe. Technically, the fine-tuning and order could be a cosmic accident or the result of a multiverse, but the simpler, more elegant explanation is intentional design. Of course, critics push back. They say, you can't calculate the probability of God existing. You can't run experiments. You can't make predictions and test them. This isn't science. It's at best informed speculation. And they're right. This is philosophy, not science. It operates in the realm of metaphysics, where we read dealing with questions about the fundamental nature of reality that science can inform but not definitively answer. Here's another major philosophical consideration. The problem of evil. If there is a creator, and that creator is all-powerful and all-good, then why is there suffering? Why do children get cancer? Why do earthquakes destroy innocent lives? Why is nature filled with predation, pain, and death? This is perhaps the strongest philosophical argument against a benevolent creator. The atheist philosopher J.L. Mackie argued that the existence of evil is logically incompatible with an all-powerful, all-knowing, all-good God. If God is all-powerful, he could prevent evil. If God is all-knowing, he knows about evil. If God is all-good, he would want to prevent it. Yet evil exists. Therefore, such a God cannot exist. Theists have responded with various theodicies. Some argue that free will requires the possibility of evil. Some argue that suffering builds character and virtue. Some argue that we can't judge God's purposes from our limited perspective. Some argue that evil is the absence of good, not a thing in itself. But honestly, none of these answers fully satisfy. The problem of suffering remains a profound challenge to belief in a benevolent creator. And many thoughtful believers admit this openly. They don't have a complete answer. They live with the tension. Now, here's the critical thing, and I need you to really hear this. Philosophy shows us that neither belief nor disbelief can be proven with absolute certainty. Both require a leap beyond pure evidence. The strongest arguments for God don't constitute proof. They suggest possibility, perhaps even probability, but not certainty. And the strongest arguments against God don't constitute proof either. They show that materialism is consistent with what we observe, but they don't prove that nothing exists beyond the material. We're in the territory of reasonable disagreement. Smart, informed, thoughtful people land on different sides of this question, and that should give us humility. The atheist has faith that materialism is true. Even though they can't prove why the universe exists, why it's comprehensible, or why consciousness emerged from unconscious matter. The believer has faith that a creator exists, even though they can't empirically demonstrate it, can't fully explain suffering, and can't prove their specific religious claims. Both are making a choice about how to interpret the evidence they see. Both are taking a stance on questions that lie beyond the reach of pure empirical investigation. And that brings us to the deeply personal part of this journey. Because ultimately, this isn't just an intellectual exercise. It's a human question, and human beings don't just think. We feel, we wonder, we search for meaning. The question isn't just what can we prove, it's what rings true to us when we look at the totality of our experience. What makes sense of the world we live in, the consciousness we possess, the moral intuitions we feel, and the beauty that moves us? That's not a scientific question. It's not even purely a philosophical question. It's an existential question, and it's the question we'll explore in the next part of our journey. Chapter 4: When Science Meets Wonder. Let me tell you about Albert Einstein. Most people know he revolutionized physics with relativity. Fewer people know about his relationship with the idea of God. Einstein wasn't religious in a conventional sense. He didn't believe in a personal God who intervenes in human affairs. But he also wasn't an atheist. When asked about his beliefs, he said, "I believe in Spinoza's God, who reveals himself in the orderly harmony of what exists, not in a God who concerns himself with the fates and actions of human beings." What did he mean by that? Einstein believed in a rational universe, a cosmos that operates according to elegant mathematical principles. And this order, this harmony, filled him with something he called religious awe. In another letter, he wrote, "The most beautiful thing we can experience is the mysterious. It is the source of all true art and science. He to whom this emotion is a stranger, who can no longer pause to wonder and stand wrapped in awe, is as good as dead." Einstein felt something when he looked at the equations describing the universe. He felt awe. He felt what he called the cosmic religious feeling. Not proof of God, but a profound sense that reality itself is sacred. Think about what he's saying. The man who unlocked the relationship between energy and matter, who showed us that space and time are woven together, who revealed that gravity is the curvature of space-time, this man stood in awe before the mystery of existence. He wasn't naive. He wasn't ignorant. He understood the universe at a level most of us can barely imagine. And that understanding didn't eliminate wonder. It deepened it. Einstein once said, "Everyone who is seriously involved in the pursuit of science becomes convinced that some spirit is manifest in the laws of the universe, one that is vastly superior to that of man." Notice he doesn't say God in the traditional sense. He says spirit. Something that transcends our human understanding. Something that manifests in the deep structure of reality. He's not alone. Many scientists report this experience. Francis Collins, who led the Human Genome Project, describes the moment he first saw the complete human DNA sequence. He said it felt like glimpsing the language of God. Collins, once an atheist, became a Christian because of his scientific work, not in spite of it. He writes in his book The Language of God, when something new is revealed about the human genome. "I experience a feeling of awe at the realization that humanity now knows something only God knew before." Collins saw the 3 billion letters of the human genetic code, the instruction manual for building a human being, the program that guides a single cell to become eyes and brain and heart and hands. And he couldn't shake the feeling that this was more than just chemistry. This was information. And information implies intelligence. Or consider John Polkinghorne, a physicist who worked on quantum field theory before becoming an Anglican priest. He said, "I think that the physical world's deep mathematical intelligibility is a reflection of the mind of the Creator." Polkinghorne spent his career studying the quantum realm, where particles behave in ways that defy common sense, where observation affects reality, where probabilities collapse into actualities. And instead of concluding that the universe is absurd or meaningless, he concluded that it reveals profound truths about the nature of reality itself. He writes, "The world is not only more mysterious than we know, it is more mysterious than we can know, but it is not silent. It speaks to those who have ears to hear." Now, I can hear the objection. Personal feelings don't prove anything. Awe isn't evidence. You can feel wonder without invoking God. Plenty of atheist scientists experience the same sense of beauty and mystery without concluding there's a creator. And that's absolutely true. Carl Sagan felt cosmic wonder. Richard Feynman felt it. Neil deGrasse Tyson feels it. They look at the universe and see magnificence, but they don't see God. So what's the difference? Why do some scientists experience awe and see it as pointing towards something transcendent, while others experience the same awe and see it as purely natural? I think it comes down to what questions you're asking, and what kind of answers satisfy you. If your question is, how does this work? Then science provides complete answers. How does DNA replicate? Through base pairing and enzymes. How do stars shine? Through nuclear fusion. How did complex life evolve? Through natural selection, acting on random mutations. These answers are true, they're testable, they're magnificently detailed, and for some people, they're enough. But if your question is, why is there a universe capable of producing DNA, stars, and life in the first place, then science hits a wall. It can describe the mechanisms, but it can't explain why those mechanisms exist. And this is where the personal element comes in. Some people look at the mechanisms and say, that's all we need. The mechanisms are self-explanatory. Others look at the same mechanisms and say, but why these mechanisms? Why is there anything at all? Here's what's interesting. These aren't simple-minded people looking for easy answers. Francis Collins understands molecular biology better than almost anyone alive. John Polkinghorne understood quantum mechanics at the deepest levels. Einstein understood the geometry of spacetime. They spent their lives interrogating nature with the most rigorous methods humanity has ever developed. And yet, their scientific understanding didn't eliminate their sense of the sacred. In many cases, it deepened it. Why? Because the deeper you look into the fabric of reality, the stranger it becomes. Quantum mechanics shows us particles that can be in two places at once, that can be entangled across vast distances, affecting each other instantaneously. That exists in superposition until observed. General relativity shows us that time itself is flexible, that massive objects warp spacetime, that black holes are real, where gravity becomes so strong that even light cannot escape. Cosmology shows us a universe that exploded from a point smaller than an atom into everything we see. That's expanding, and the expansion is accelerating. That contains dark matter and dark energy, which together make up 95% of the universe, yet we don't know what they are. The universe is not just orderly, it's weird, it's mysterious. It's far stranger than our everyday intuitions suggest. And that strangeness, that mystery, creates space for questions that science alone cannot fill. Arthur Eddington, the physicist who confirmed Einstein's theory of general relativity, said, "The universe is not only queerer than we suppose, but queerer than we can suppose." And that's the key phrase. Queerer than we can suppose. There are limits to human understanding. There are questions that may forever lie beyond our reach. And in that space of unknowing, in that mystery, different people make different choices about what to believe. Some choose to say, "I don't know," and that's okay. I'll stick with what we can measure and test. Others choose to say, "I don't know, but I sense something more. I feel the presence of something that transcends the material." Neither choice is stupid. Neither is intellectually dishonest. Both are responses to the fundamental mystery of existence. And here's something profound. The scientists who believe in a creator often say their faith makes them better scientists, not worse. Because they believe the universe is comprehensible, they're motivated to comprehend it. Because they believe there's order, they search for that order. Because they believe reality is rational, they trust that reason can reveal its secrets. Johannes Kepler, who discovered the laws of planetary motion, wrote, "I was merely thinking God's thoughts after him." He saw his scientific work as uncovering the mathematical mind behind nature. Gregor Mendel, who founded genetics, was a monk. He believed that studying heredity was studying God's design. Georges Lemaitre, who first proposed the Big Bang theory, was a Catholic priest. He believed the universe had a beginning because he believed in creation. These weren't people whose faith hindered their science. Their faith motivated their science. They believed the universe was worth studying because it revealed something about its source. Now, this doesn't prove they were right about God, but it does prove something important. Science and faith are not inherently incompatible. They can coexist, they can even reinforce each other. The question isn't whether a scientist can believe in God, clearly many do. The question is whether belief in God is reasonable, whether it's supported by evidence, whether it makes sense of what we observe. And that's a question we'll continue to explore. But for now, understand this. When brilliant minds look at the universe and sense something sacred, they're not being naive. They're responding to genuine mystery. They're asking questions that deserve to be asked. Whether you agree with their conclusions or not, their wonder is real. Their awe is justified. And their questions are worth taking seriously. Chapter 5, The God of the Gaps. But we need to be brutally honest here. There's a dangerous trap in this way of thinking. It's called the God of the Gaps argument, and it's something both believers and skeptics need to understand. Here's how it works. Whenever science can't explain something, you insert God as the explanation. Lightning, God. Disease, God. The origin of species, God. The problem. Every single time, science eventually finds the real explanation. Lightning is an electrical discharge. Disease is caused by pathogens. Species evolve through natural selection. Every gap that was once filled with God has been filled with science instead. So critics argue, if you base your belief in God on scientific gaps, you're building your faith on a foundation that's constantly eroding. Neil deGrasse Tyson puts it this way. God is an ever-receding pocket of scientific ignorance that's getting smaller and smaller and smaller as time moves on. It's a powerful criticism. And it devastates many people's faith when they realize the God they believed in was just a placeholder for what they didn't understand yet. But here's the nuance, and this is critical. There's a difference between God of the gaps and God of the patterns. God of the gaps says, I don't know how this works, therefore God. That's intellectually lazy. God of the patterns says, the more I understand how this works, the more I see evidence of intentional design in the structure itself. That's intellectually honest. Let me give you an example. 1,000 years ago, someone might have said, I don't know how the eye works, so God must have made it. That's a gap argument. Today, we understand the eye in incredible detail. We know about photoreceptors, the optic nerve, how the brain processes visual information. We even understand how eyes evolved gradually over millions of years from simple light-sensitive cells. Does that eliminate God? Not necessarily, because now the question becomes, how did evolution produce such an elegant solution? How did the laws of chemistry and biology and natural selection conspire to create consciousness that can perceive light and turn it into meaning? The gap has been filled, but the pattern has become more obvious. The question has shifted from how to why is this even possible? Alistair McGrath, a scientist and theologian, explains it well. Science gives us mechanisms, it doesn't give us meaning. Understanding how something works doesn't tell you why it exists or what its purpose is. So here's the key insight. If your faith depends on what science doesn't know, you're in trouble. But if your faith is about the bigger question of why there's a universe at all, why it's ordered, why we can understand it, and why it produces conscious beings who ask these questions, then scientific discovery doesn't threaten your belief. It enriches it. The question isn't whether we should have God in the gaps. The question is whether the whole picture, gaps filled in all, points towards something beyond pure materialism. And that's a question each person must answer for themselves. Chapter 6, The Personal Synthesis. So where does this leave us? We've looked at the scientific evidence. We've heard the materialist explanation. We've explored the philosophical arguments. We've acknowledged the dangers of bad reasoning. Now comes the most difficult part. The personal part, because at some point, all of us have to decide what we believe about reality. And that decision isn't purely intellectual, it's existential. Let me share a thought experiment. Imagine two people looking at the same painting. One sees random splashes of color. The other sees intentional brushstrokes creating meaning. The painting itself hasn't changed, but the interpretation reveals something about the observer. The same thing happens when we look at the universe. Some see elegant mathematical laws and think, beautiful accident. Others see the same laws and think beautiful intentions. Neither can prove the other wrong with pure logic. Both are making a leap from what they observe to what they believe about ultimate reality. The scientist who comes to believe in a creator isn't abandoning science. They're asking what science points toward. They're following the evidence as far as it goes, and then making a judgment call about the best explanation for what lies beyond the evidence. Let me quote Freeman Dyson, a physicist and mathematician who worked on quantum mechanics. He said, "The more I examine the universe and the details of its architecture, the more evidence I find that the universe in some sense must have known we were coming." That's not proof, that's interpretation. But it's an interpretation made by someone who spent their life studying the universe at its deepest levels. Or consider Max Planck, the founder of quantum theory. He said, "All matter originates and exists only by virtue of a force. We must assume behind this force the existence of a conscious and intelligent mind. This mind is the matrix of all matter." Again, not proof, but a thoughtful conclusion from someone who understood matter better than almost anyone. Here's what I find most interesting. Many of the greatest scientists in history, the ones who revolutionized our understanding of reality, were not materialists. Newton, Galileo, Kepler, Faraday, Maxwell, Planck, and many others believed in a creator. Were they all deluded? Were they all victims of their time? Or did they see something in the deep structure of reality that suggested a deeper truth? I'm not saying you have to agree with them. I'm saying their perspective deserves serious consideration. Because these weren't people looking for easy answers. These were people who dedicated their lives to hard questions. And for them, science and faith weren't enemies. They were partners in the search for truth. Science showed them how the universe works. Faith suggested why it works that way. Chapter 7, Living with Mystery. Here's something both believers and atheists need to accept. We will never have complete certainty. Not in this lifetime. Not with our current tools. Not with our limited perspective. The universe is vastly larger than we are. It existed for billions of years before we showed up. It will exist for billions of years after we're gone. We are tiny, brief creatures trying to understand something infinite and eternal. That should humble us. All of us. The believer must admit, I cannot prove God with the same certainty. I can prove gravity. My faith requires trust beyond evidence. The atheist must admit, I cannot prove there is no God. My materialism requires faith that only physical explanations will ever be needed. Both positions require intellectual humility. And in our current culture, where everyone is so certain they're right and everyone else is wrong, humility is exactly what we need. The physicist Richard Feynman, who was agnostic, said something beautiful about this. I have approximate answers and possible beliefs and different degrees of certainty about different things, but I'm not absolutely sure of anything. And there are many things I don't know anything about. But I don't have to know the answer. I don't feel frightened by not knowing things. That's wisdom. Not knowing is okay. Living with mystery is okay. In fact, it might be the most honest position any of us can take. But here's the paradox. Even though we can't have certainty, we still have to make choices. We have to decide how to live. We have to decide what we believe matters. We have to decide if the universe has meaning, or if meaning is something we create ourselves. And those decisions shape everything. How we treat other people. How we face suffering. How we understand death. What we think happens after we die. Whether we believe this life is all there is, or just one chapter in a longer story. These aren't abstract questions. They're the most practical questions there are. So even though certainty eludes us, choice confronts us. And the choice we make, whether conscious or unconscious, becomes the lens through which we see everything else. The key is to make that choice honestly, not because it's comfortable, not because it's what everyone around you believes, not because it lets you avoid hard questions. Make it because after looking at all the evidence, considering all the arguments, and searching your own heart, it's the choice that rings most true to you. That's intellectual integrity, and it's something our world desperately needs more of. Chapter 8, The Ongoing Quest. So where does this leave us at the end of our journey? Have we solved the ultimate question? Have we proven whether the cosmos has a creator? No, and honestly, that was never the point. The point was to show you that this is a question worth taking seriously. It's a question that brilliant minds have wrestled with. It's a question that science informs but cannot answer alone. It's a question that demands both our reason and our wonder. Here's what I hope you take away from this. The conflict between science and faith is often overstated. Many of the loudest voices on both sides want you to believe you must choose one or the other. You must be a rational atheist or a faith-based believer. You must trust science or trust God. But that's a false choice. The real choice is between closed-mindedness and open inquiry, between certainty and humility, between simplistic answers and living with mystery. The greatest scientists were curious. They asked questions. They challenged assumptions. They followed evidence wherever it led, and many of them found that the deeper they looked, the more they sensed something beyond the material. You might not reach the same conclusion, and that's okay. What matters is that you approach the question honestly. Look at the universe with fresh eyes. Read the arguments on all sides. Talk to people who disagree with you, and most importantly, trust your own ability to think, to question, and to decide. Because here's the beautiful truth. The universe doesn't stop being mysterious just because we label it. Whether you call it God or nature, or the multiverse, or quantum fields, you're still standing in front of something that shouldn't exist, but does. Something that follows perfect laws, even though it doesn't have to. Something that produced conscious beings who can contemplate their own existence. That's remarkable. That's worth your awe, and that's worth your honest investigation. The quest doesn't end here. For some of you, this video might spark a new journey. For others, it might reinforce what you already believe. For others still, it might leave you with more questions than answers. All of those outcomes are good. Because the worst outcome would be indifference. The worst outcome would be thinking this question doesn't matter. It does matter. It's the question that underlies every other question. And the fact that you watched this far tells me you know that. So keep searching. Keep questioning. Keep being willing to change your mind when new evidence or new arguments challenge your current position. That's what it means to have integrity. That's what it means to love truth more than comfort. And that, ultimately, is what both science and spirituality are really about. The relentless pursuit of truth, wherever it leads, whatever it costs. Conclusion: we've covered a lot of ground today. From the fine-tuning of the universe to the limits of materialism, from ancient philosophy to modern physics, from the God of the gaps to the God of the patterns, from intellectual arguments to personal wonder. If I've done my job, you're not walking away with easy answers. You're walking away with better questions. Can science and faith coexist? Can a rational person believe in a creator? Can someone who understands evolution and quantum mechanics also see the universe as sacred? The answer, as we've seen, is yes, but only if both sides approach the question with honesty, humility, and respect for what they don't know. The cosmos is vast. Your life is brief, but the questions you ask and the meaning you find matter more than you might think. So I'll leave you with one final thought. Not from a scientist or a philosopher or a theologian, but from a poet. Rainer Maria Rilke wrote, "Be patient toward all that is unsolved in your heart, and try to love the questions themselves. Do not now seek the answers, which cannot be given you, because you would not be able to live them." And the point is, to live everything. Live the questions now. Live the questions. Keep searching, keep wondering, keep letting the mystery of existence fill you with awe. Because whether there's a creator or not, this universe is a gift. And the fact that you're conscious enough to ask these questions is nothing short of miraculous. Thank you for joining me on this journey. If this video made you think, if it challenged you, or if it helped you articulate something you've been wrestling with, let me know in the comments below. I read every single one, and here's what I'd love to hear from you. What's your position on this question? Are you a believer who sees science as revealing God's methods? Are you an atheist who finds meaning in a universe without a creator? Or are you somewhere in between, still searching for answers? Share your thoughts respectfully. This is a space for honest dialogue, not arguments. We can disagree without being disagreeable. If you enjoyed this deep dive, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. We explore the biggest questions at the intersection of science, philosophy, and meaning right here on Logic Over Spirit. Until next time, keep questioning, keep searching, keep looking at the stars and wondering what they mean. This is Logic Over Spirit, reminding you that the pursuit of truth is the most noble thing a human can do. See you in the next one. Thanks for watching.